Hello, I'm Barbara Levin, Executive Director of Neurofibromatosis Mid-Atlantic. We're a 36-year-old nonprofit agency dedicated to support, awareness, and education about the variable and incurable and often devastating disorder called neurofibromatosis. This year in our interviews, we're paying close attention to some of the social manifestations that affect people who are vulnerable as a result of an incurable disorder. We want no one to feel like they're alone with it, and if they don't wish to be, we also want people to know that they are more than their disorder. Today we're going to explore the important topic of domestic violence. This is not an age issue. This is not an anger issue, a gender issue, an economic issue, or an issue exclusive to people with NF or any other disorder. It is, as I understand it, a control issue. To help explain domestic violence and its impact on vulnerable populations, it's my distinct honor to introduce Dr. Tara Richards, Assistant Professor in the School of Criminal Justice at the University of Baltimore. Dr. Richards is a recognized expert in the area of domestic violence and has recently completed a 10-year analysis of domestic violence offenders. She is the editor of one of the contributors to a new book entitled Sexual Victimization Then and Now, which is published by Sage Publications. Again, we're so honored, and Dr. Richards, I want to thank you for coming and welcome you so much to this.
Thanks, Barbara.
Dr. Richards, is my earlier assertion correct, that domestic violence is not about anything other than control?
Yes, and I think what's especially important to point out is that oftentimes when we think of domestic violence, we think just about the physical violence, and domestic violence is oftentimes not just about physical violence. There's usually an element of coercive control. So, abusers may use emotional violence. They may use financial abuse or sexual abuse really to control and dominate their victims. So while we often think solely about physical violence, it's important to consider the holistic nature of domestic violence and recognize that even if there's not physical violence going on, it can still be an abusive relationship. If the partner is dominating and controlling their partner, it can be abusive.
As I understand it, NF and domestic violence share one common characteristic, which is NF can affect people of all genders, all races, all nationalities, all socioeconomic characterizations, and that is true of domestic violence as well, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. Domestic violence, it's colorblind, it's age blind, it's gender blind. We do see that women are more at risk for victimization. They do have a higher prevalence rate for victimization than men. But we know that males are victims of domestic violence as well. And sometimes violent relationships include mutual violence, where both partners are violent and controlling of each other at different points in the relationship. Oftentimes what we see in a violent relationship is this cycle of tension building, some violent act, and then sort of this makeup or honeymoon period. And so, violent partners are not violent all the time. They're not abusive all the time. And, this can be especially troublesome to a victim because, they love and care about their partner. So, it does become hard because, as you indicated, domestic violence isn't just about young dating partners. It can happen in long-term relationships over the course of many, many years. So, as that relationship grows and the bond continues. Maybe the one partner is the caretaker in the relationship. There may be children in the relationship. There may be financial connections in the relationship. It gets harder and harder to sever an abusive relationship.
So there are periods of calm.
Absolutely,
Which
absolutely,
which also shares something with NF because it is so unpredictable. And it sounds like the violence can be
absolutely,
unpredictable as well. The
absolutely.
is there any research that would indicate that people with, as you said, more women are subject to this at some point, to a certain extent, I mean. And is there anything that indicates that people with disabilities are more vulnerable?
Absolutely. What we do see in the research is that abusers often use isolation and intimidation to control their victims. So when you have individuals who are more isolated, don't have significant social connections, they are at they're at a higher risk for both entering into an abusive relationship and staying in an abusive relationship, because that first and foremost they have fewer social connections to help them if they wanted to leave, and since isolation and intimidation is a tactic of control, a population that is more isolated is at a higher risk.
Yes, which makes total sense, of course. The Our audience is worldwide,
Hmm.
so I don't want to talk. I want to talk about safety planning with you, but we can't confine it to a certain area. And
Sure.
you're in Baltimore, we're in Baltimore. We can't confine it to there, and we really need to ask you about safety, not only for the victims of domestic violence, but for people who are observing and want to help.
Absolutely. So I think, anytime we think about safety planning, the first question that individuals often ask about domestic violence is, why doesn't the victim just leave? Well, what we see in the literature is that when a victim does leave a violent relationship, that's actually the most dangerous period, because that's when the abuser has lost control, has lost that control that they hold so dearly over their partner. Um, and so, what we mean when we talk about safety planning is developing a strategy to safely leave the abusive partner so that you minimize that risk during that period where you're severing the relationship. And it doesn't really matter where you are, whether you're in the United States, another country. You want to think through leaving the relationship, and you want to involve others so that, again, you break that isolation and you create a social support system that's going to help you leave the relationship. That may be a domestic violence advocate or a shelter advocate or someone else from a social service agency that helps you plan a safe way to leave the abuser, and make sure that anyone else that is in the home, children, other family members, are also safe when the victim leaves. Sort of common sense strategies like making sure that you have all your important information in your possession. So making sure that you have any medication, access to your finances, important documents like your IDs and your social security cards or medical cards, because oftentimes abusers do control those items in the household. So making sure that you have access to those things, and that you set up that support system before you decide to start strategizing about leaving the partner. That's really, really important.
Sage advice. What if someone suspects that another person is being victimized? What would you suggest?
So it's it's hard to make broad suggestions because every relationship is different. But what we what we see to be most helpful to victims of domestic violence is open support. So believing someone if they tell you that they're being abused, and also not being brave enough to bring that up with a loved one or a friend if you see signs that that person is being abused, if their partner seems to control every move, if the friend or loved one is constantly talking about the partner's temper, or if they need to check in with the partner many times, if there really seems to be control and jealousy and violence in that relationship. Being brave enough to open the dialogue and let that person know that you're there for them, and will support them if and when they decide to make a change in that relationship. But also being very careful about not demanding that they leave the partner, or trying again to take control away from them, because that's what the abuser does. So really empowering that friend or loved one to start making choices for themselves, and really just being that support system that would support or assist them in any choices that they decided to make.
Excellent. That is such sage advice. And what we will try to do certainly for anyone who visits our website and our social media is we will try to put up some general numbers as well as a wonderful document that you provided us. So we thank you. And this is such valuable information. We're so appreciative, and we thank you. I know you've said all of those things before, and probably many times, but for our people, it might be hearing it for the first time, and I think you've done a wonderful service. So, Dr. Richards, I thank you. We wish you luck, and we hope that everyone goes out and reads your book.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye.